Ahoy there, campers. Welcome back to Camp Legend. I've got my buddy Gibby with me. I'm Ian, or DBN. And for our Lorcana fans out there, we are going to do our second iteration on budget lists for a certain color. And today we are looking at amber. The goal, of course, for this little mini series, this is going to be in the Rise of the Floodborn meta. In about a month, things are going to shift, but the principles behind these decks will likely stay the same and will be able to be upgraded with other, commons, uncommons, and some cheaper cards from Into the Inkland. So hopefully this will still be useful in the next couple months as people join the game with the new set and come in and want to build decks for their friends and family who are just trying the game out. We have found, I know Gibby, I speak for myself, but I know Gibby has too. Like, we've got all these commons now, and we're like, what are we supposed to do with all these? So I started making like budget decks to just hand to people. Be like, here, play, join the game.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's so many different options out there now. And as we get more cards in the card pool between Inklands being revealed and even back from when we transitioned from first chapter into Rise of the Floodborn, some of the cards that used to be expensive kind of lose their luster from a market perspective and become cheaper and make budget decks a whole lot more feasible to build, especially with the printing that ramped up when Rise of the Floodborn came out too. So the options are, I don't want to say endless, but becoming much, much bigger.
They're much more open, that's for sure. And like you said, I mean, even just if you haven't checked it out yet, I'll probably put it up in the cards somewhere. But you'll be able to watch the one we did on Amethyst, and that one actually, some of the prices have gone down on those cards already in like the week or two since we recorded that. So check that one out. And if you're just getting to the game and need a starting point, these decks will hopefully get it so that you may not win a tournament. In fact, you probably won't, but you will not completely embarrass yourself if you go to a league night and bring your new deck. And most of these, the goal is to stay under a budget of $30 for the singles prices. And so you'll be able to see that on the screen here. Let's go ahead and kick it off. Gibby, we've got your first deck. We've got 3 decks. Gibby brought 2. I've got 1 for you, all focused on amber. So Gibby, what is this deck that we're going to look at first?
So this is a deck that you have seen before, and the image in the top left next to the name, I don't know why it's showing the wrong colors, but it is. But as you can see from the actual deck list itself, this is a Sapphire and Amber deck, a deck that we have talked pretty extensively about and tweaked, that just so happens to be a budget list. I've played it quite a bit, and it is fun, functional, and actually pretty dang good. A fan favorite card of the Rise of the Floodborn set was and is Grand Pabbie. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. So there's plenty of cards within Amber and even some within Sapphire that heal. So naturally, those are good pairings. This deck is called Pabbie's Treats and Yeets. So because you are kind of blasting some people away. With launch, banish chosen item of yours to deal 5 damage to a chosen character. We have 12 items here in this list between popsicles, dingle hoppers, and gumbo pots that all heal your units. So the whole point of this deck is we want to build a decent board out and start using some of the cards that heal to kind of maintain that board state. We've got Winnie the Pooh having a think for some ramp here. Just in case you need to get to some of the higher costed units. We are also running, looks like about 10 uninkables in this iteration of the list as well. So you may end up running into a card maybe you don't need, and Winnie the Pooh can help you ink that uninkable card. Nick Wilde to be able to pull back some of your popsicles. Flaversham and Rapunzel Gifted Artist are both your card draw engines here to be able to kind of refill your hand. Every time a card is healed or removed by 1 damage is the nomenclature that Lorcana uses, you do draw a card. Hiram, every time you banish one of your own, you can banish one of your own items to draw 2 cards. He is a staple from Rise of the Floodborn. So you've got decent card draw here. And eventually, if you can get down Grand Pabbie and Jasmine, Queen of Agrabah, which you can shift in using the 1-cost Jasmine, you can just do board-centric heals, and Pabbie can get you upwards to, even if he quests himself, he can get you upwards to 7, 9 lore in 1 turn if you're healing multiple units, along with his questing value of 3 as well, which is pretty great. So this deck loves to heal, loves to build a board, ramp up, and just get Grand Pabbie out doing his magic.
Yeah, so Gibby and I have both played versions of this, and we've been trying to make it work, to various degrees of success. Sometimes this is a deck that can beat up on, less refined lists, but can sometimes struggle into like super hard
For
control,
sure.
like you might see at the highest levels. But what's really cool about this is the more I've played it, and I wanted to pass this on, because Gibby and I have sort of have developed the instinct of like when to play something, when not to. But for somebody just trying this list out, don't forget, like when you're playing the early turns, if your opponent is not pressuring you, if not putting out units that are like scary, you don't have to put too much out. You can just sit there and, if you have a Jasmine on turn one, I wouldn't probably just not play it on turn one. It doesn't really contribute much to the board, but a popsicle, on the other hand, you can get these items out ahead of time
Absolutely.
before you need them if your opponent's not pressuring. And if they are, get down Noi, get down Cruella de Vil. Those are things that can trade in to some of the little aggro stuff that's running around out there.
Yeah, your curve in the early game here is really solid with 12 1-drops. I mean, you've got pretty much close to that between Cruella de Vil, Gumbo Pots, and even be our guest to go digging for something in case you brick your hand. But you've got about over double digit. You got double digit 1-drops and 2-drops in this list. So your curve should be nice. You can see that we're loaded here in the 2-drop slot. And you curve nicely into the 3s and 4s to where you start ramping with your 3-drops between Dock and Wind of the Pooh to then be able to get your 5s and 6s and 7s out and playing multiple things. So an early solid game deck.
Yeah, and it does have sort of a combo finish. That's how it gets across, the finish line is, you've got all these things with big butts, right? Like Hiram's got 6 defense, Nick Wild's got 4, Jasmine and Rapunzel each have like 5 or 6 or something like that. So these things can get damaged without going down, and then you heal them with Grand Pabbie and gain a bunch of lore that way. The cool thing that I want to credit Gibby with is the Last Stand, because I had not played any of those. This deck does not attack well. And Last Stand, Gibby just started including this in the list, and I first was like, I don't know, it's uninkable. But this totally cleans up the issues you have with running into a big unit like a Cinderella, which has resist too, and you can just say, all right, my little baby Jasmine's gonna bonk it, and then I'll blow it up regardless of any damage that's been done. Really cool inclusion from Gibby.
Yeah, it's basically being able to trade a 1-drop into a 7-drop or anything else scary like that for really on a really consistent basis without really much harm within your hand. So it's, especially if you can keep the other uninkables down in the list, it's a great inclusion. I love Last Stand.
And as far as budget decks go, like this is going to be one of the ones with the most consistent and reliable card draw package, because Hiram and Popsicles and Nyx, they're cheap, and so you really
and Rapunzel's,
and it's a good investment. Like it's a good investment of your money on the dollars that would take to get Hiram. Like, $113, no problem. It's worth it. He's going to be meta for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as they continue to add more items into the fold. So that's this Pabbie's Treats and Yeets list. And by the way, we will list, just like we did in our last video, we'll list all of these deck codes down along with the video. So you can find them on Dreamborn, whereas where we're posting and making all of these decks. So you'll be able to find these easily as you are watching this video. So let's go ahead and move on to our second deck, which is your deck that you've made. This is an Amber and Amethyst deck called Discount Dwarves. So go ahead and run us through this deck, DBN.
Yeah, so my inspiration here was the fact that you basically have almost everything you need to build a Dwarfs deck out of one of the starter decks. The problem is Dwarves are not historically that good compared to other things. However, they do have the unique benefit as far as an aggro deck goes. Despite it being slower than other aggro decks, they are chonky. Compared to most other aggro things, they actually have a lot of units. If you look at Sleepy nodding off, Sleepy has 2 questing and a 2/3 body. Now it has the negative of it enters play exerted, but on turn 2, if you're going first especially, that's not a big deal. The only thing that can really take it out at that stage is Captain Hook, and you'll see that before you play it, right? And so the idea here being you are a slightly slower than normal aggro deck. That comes with some downsides, but it comes with a big upside is if your opponent is playing early game, trading and stuff like that, it actually gets a little bit hard because you've got a 2-drop with 4 defense. You've got a fantastic sort of centerpiece of the deck in Bashful. This is the card that makes you play Dwarves. It is a 4-cost inkable 2/5 5 defense, and it quests for 3 as long as you have
Quests
another
for
dwarf in
3.
play. Quests for 3 on turn 4. I mean, that's pretty good. And with 5 defense, it's not dying to smash. It's not dying to Strength of a Raging Fire unless your opponent has 5 things out, which at that point you're probably losing anyways. Bashful is just a super fantastic card to drop down. Your opponent looks at it like, I can't do anything about it before it will get to quest next turn.
You've got 20 plus dwarves in this deck too, so Bashful is going to be rather consistent.
Yeah, pretty darn consistent. And you have Snow White on 2, uninkable but worthwhile because it discounts all your other dwarves by 1. This is not a great card to play down in a steel matchup. If you know your opponent's playing steel, you might want to wait to play this until turn 3 or 4 when you can play it and immediately buy another dwarf with the discount. But if you're playing it's anything that's not steel, drop it down on 2 and watch your opponent cry as you empty your hand onto the board with like 3 dwarves over the next 2 turns. It's pretty darn fun. And all of the other cards from Amethyst are just here to support the aggro game plan, right? You have Pascal, which gains evasives while you have another character. You have Maleficent that draws a card. You have Rafiki, which, if you have paid attention to my decks, I love playing a little bit of Rush or some sort of reactive tool in my aggro decks, especially if they're a little slower than like a hyper aggro, because you need to slow down rival aggro decks. And so Rafiki and Zeus are helping out with that a ton. You can move some numbers around if you wanted to increase those to 3/3. But since the dwarves are a little bulkier than some of the things, if you recall my Emerald Amethyst list, those don't have a lot of attack. These dwarves are a little bit chonkier, so they can trade a little bit better throughout the course of the game. Hades is in this list. And Hades is going to help you pull back a couple cards. And similarly, you have Snow White. This is what we blew our budget on for the deck. And admittedly, you don't need this. You don't need this in the deck.
$7 a piece. Yeah, I mean, but Snow White, it synergizes perfectly in this deck, being able to shift into and give you card drawback.
Exactly. And it quests for 2. You know, a lot of times you'll get this little 2-cost Snow White on the board, and you won't really know what to do with it after you've emptied the dwarves from your hand. And so instead of just throwing it away to your opponent because it's like really poorly statted, instead you can sit on it for an extra turn and then drop Snow White as a shift target, start pulling back dwarves that have already, died, and quest for 2 with it. So I really like this. I included this more for your own knowledge so that if you have a Snow White sitting in your collection, or if you have a buddy that's like, Snow White's like, not, as far as legendaries go, it's not that great. I don't really want it. Like, I've seen people at my own league going, does anybody want the Snow White? I'm trying to get rid of it. There's only like 2 decks it goes in. And so this is an opportunity, if you pull one of these, to put it to good use. And then obviously, as far as non-characters go, we have friends on the other side. Pretty basic, draw 2 cards. There's plenty of ways this can be upgraded. Like I said, maybe one more Snow White. Ironically, Mufasa, if you pulled one of those, you can just sort of just jam it into the list because there's so many characters in here. You just sort of just jam it in there. And then the queens, those are my comfort card. I really just like having queens in the list, in any Amber list, but they don't have to be in here. If you wanted to trade those out for something a little more aggressive, you totally could. So anyways, that's Discount Dwarves. It's not that complicated. It's pretty basic, but Bashful is a crazy card that's kind of worth throwing a deck around.
Yeah, this is a deck that's going to curve out very well. There's a lot of synergy just by the clan tag between the dwarves and just the sheer number of them, and they all synergize with each other. So the more dwarves you can get out, the more you can kind of play on curve. And like you said, Steel's probably the biggest matchup problem for this between Let the Storm Rage On being a 2 damage removal tool that could be Song or Strength of a Raging Fire or Grab Your Sword. There's just a lot of removal in Steel, and that's no shocker. That's nothing new. No. But this deck can beat it if it can outswarm a Steel deck, but you just have to go fast. It's got to be able to go fast.
And that really comes down to knowing what to ink, right? And so, you've got a couple things like Dopey that are almost always going to be ink unless you can get it discounted. It's not a great card. Like, it's the worst dwarf, but it is great when you can play it for 1 or even 2 like then it's worth it. But most of the time you're inking it, right? Similarly, anything that's like you might want to ink some of your one drops if you know you're against steel because they can get killed off by things. So after you play your first one drop, just start inking the rest of them and playing things with better defense. But that's the thing that's nice about this: Simba, Sleepy, Sneezy, Doc, Piglet, Bashful, Grumpy, and Happy, all of those have more than 2 defense, which is the magic number, right? Like of grab your swords and storm rage on. So ideally, you may not win a ton of games with this, but you can if your opponent gets even a slightly clunky hand, you will run them over.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this deck just probably is brick proof.
Yeah, it really is. And it has quite a few uninkables, but they are all cards that you really want to play. So like you
And
ink
cheap.
things that aren't them. And yeah, exactly. So my dad actually plays a version of this that I built for him when he was like, oh, what is this Lorcana thing? I'm like, here, don't worry, Dad, I got you. And he has beaten some of my strong decks with this just by hitting a sick curve and just going quest. Oh, here's Bashful. So it's a pretty cool list that I encourage you to mess around with because all the cards except for Snow White are dirt cheap.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and move to our last deck here. This is another one of mine, and this is a Steel and Amberlist that I call Backstage Pass. So you've got Stitch Rockstar here. He's putting on a concert for all the VIP, aka most of everybody else in this list has Prince or Princess or royalty tags of some sort. So they are the VIP guests of this concert. So we've got a Backstage Pass. So what we're going to be doing here is this is a really good way to build a budget aggro list utilizing Stitch Rockstar. So Stitch Rockstar is a very sought after card from Chapter 1 that says Shift 4. So we've got the one drop Stitch New Dog in here that allows you to play this on 4. And it's whenever you play a character with 2 cost or less, you may exert them when they come in to draw cards. It's a great card engine here, and we are loaded at the 1 drop and 2 drop slot here. So the 1 drop Stitch to shifting in, Tiana because of the 1/3 body, Simba Protective Cub, and then we're running both copies of Hercules here, Hercules Hero in Training and Hercules True Hero, because we don't mind the bodyguard body here, and we like the 2/3 body here on a 2 drop. That's great. To be able to shift into the Hercules Divine Hero. This card is on the up and up. More and more people are seeing the value of Hercules Divine Hero because of
Gibby,
Resist
you and I
2.
have been all over this card since it came out. You and I have been just like we've been the biggest stands for this Hercules Divine Hero out there. Like we've been telling everyone, and it's finally being respected.
And the difference is that it's got high competition at the slot, right? And that's maybe why the value was kind of masked for a while, because you're comparing
you
Hercules
got Tinkerbells,
Tinkerbells, the Giant Fairy. You've got the Cinderellas in that slot as well. So you're taking a look at what you can shift, and you don't want to overload your deck with shift typically. And Hercules Divine Hero kind of flew under the radar, but that Resist 2 is becoming a really big deal, along with another unit that we've got in here that's got Resist 2, which is to Tiana, Celebrated Princess. At a 4 cost, even though she's only got 1 attack, also if you empty your hand by chance and you've exerted Tiana, your opponent can't play any actions, which can be huge for clearing your board or being able to a whole new world to be able to refill their hand. And denying those things can be really, really great. Almost every deck at this point is running some sort of removal tools that they would love to be using, but Tiana says no. So you've got quite a bit of resist units in here between Hercules Divine Hero, Tiana. On 3, you've got the Prince, Never Give Up with Bodyguard. So you've got some Bodyguard units in here, as well as quite a bit of resist in here to maintain a healthy board state and protect that Stitch Rockstar. And once you get Stitch Rockstar out, you've got a whole bevy of 1 drops and 2 drops to be able to drop, turn sideways, and keep refilling your hand. An inclusion that I added in here, which isn't necessarily a must, but I did like in this list just because of the characters that I was putting in it, is the Grand Duke, Advisor of the King.
Oh, huge.
If you can put this in a list because it fits, and majority, if not all of your units are having these tags between Prince, Princess, King, and Queen, it's a great 2-drop to be able to play, even to be able to drop later in the game, because it does happen immediately. So you can trick trades as well against your opponent who doesn't think that you can kill your units. If you drop the Grand Duke, and suddenly your 1-drops and 2-drops that really weren't that scary, if you need to catch up on board, suddenly you're trading effectively, right? You're getting 1+ attack on all of these other 1-drops and 2-drops and 3-drops, or you're making it even harder for them to clear your units, because you've got the Prince now has 2 attack and he's still got the resist on him and bodyguard. So it's a great tool to be able to add in here, but it's not a must.
Yeah, if I can chime in here, I was excited when Gibby said that he was going to do a steel amber deck, because it's been something that I've kicked around myself and even recommended to new people, which is interesting because I had a situation where I recommended building a steel amber deck to a pretty new player, and somebody next to me was like, dude, what are you talking about? That deck is so expensive. I'm like, Steel Song is very expensive, but you don't have to play meta Steel Song in order to have a strong budget deck
Exactly.
for a new player. And Tiana specifically has opened recently in the meta, opened the gates in this super greedy control meta. It has basically opened the gates for low to the ground board-based strategies to have a top end. Tiana is weirdly the top end, because once Tiana's on the board, you don't want cards in your hand, which has always been the problem with playing against these control decks, is you run out of the cards and then they kill your board and you can do nothing. But now they can't kill your board with actions. They have to respect your board with things of their own. And so we had started seeing decks get so greedy, they were cutting Mauis in red decks, right? Like we've seen like these decks and like Mimfoxes being like the only source of rush, but Mimfox only has 4 and you have all this resist. And exactly so it. Tiana can allow you to play a version of Steel and Amber that does not care about getting big, Cinderellas and, things like that. It doesn't care. It just wants to go turbo and then have a board that cannot be touched. And this is such a cool iteration, Gibby. I want to highlight especially the Grand Duke like you did, because I think this is one of the best budget rares, weirdly, because the more you get access to expensive things, the more you are incentivized to remove the tribal tag. Because yes, is Steel Song a ridiculous deck? Of course. And so if you get a playset of Cinderellas and big giant Tinkerbells and and Cinderella ballroom sensations and all these expensive cards, if you get them, you play them, right? But for a budget person, the ability to play a Tiana on turn 1, and if I'm looking at this, I would even say let's bump the Tiana count up, because if you drop Grand Duke afterwards, if you drop Grand Duke afterwards, you have a 1-mana 2/3 bonking into all of the 2/2s out there. The Queen, dead. Stitch, dead. Get out of here. I love it so much. All of the royalty in these 2 colors is just all over the place on good, like, value characters that are just in a bubble, good cards. Like Prince Eric, he doesn't synergize with anything. He's just a good card in a bubble. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's so much to love about this list. There's a lot of options too. If you feel like some of the, removal would be excessive and you just want to go turbo on board as much as possible, a couple 0 to heroes could be great, because your board is not going to get cleaned up as soon as you drop things like the Prince and Hercules as bodyguards,
Yep.
Yeah.
Let the Storm Rage on for a little bit of card fill, and the smashes, just because they're basically they're a little bit cheaper, but a very useful tool of removal, especially things like Prince Arthur.
They're fantastic cards. Don't get me wrong. I'm not even advocating for them to be removed. All I'm saying is this deck, you can modify it to fit your local game meta.
Yeah.
And so if nobody is playing...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, if nobody's playing aggro in your list, you don't need to run removal.
Yeah.
Like if nobody's running aggro in your meta, you can reduce some of the smashes or Storm Rage ons and put in more things that allow you to swarm the board as fast as humanly possible and empty your hand for that big Tiana closer. It's awesome.
Yeah, I considered having here Hades, the 4-drop Hades in here as well, instead of the Hans 13th in line. Well, you're right. So I thought about adding more of them in here. I really struggled back and forth between the Hades drop slot here, and then the Hans,
Mhm.
13th in line. That's why there's 2 of them and 3 of them. They
Mhm.
Hans is a little bit more expensive at 87 cents a card right now,
Mhm.
but it just does really well because it quests for 2 and it does additional damage, being able to poke at things behind all of the bodyguard that you've got. So I really liked this card in the list, but you can never have you can never have too much card draw in a list, right? But the way I thought about this deck was it's almost like a gymnast stuck in honey. It is flexible, but really sticky. All of your units are all of your units are going to be on board. They're going to last a long time, but this deck is very moldable to have exactly the way you want to play it against whatever kind of
Mhm.
opponent you're running into. So there's definitely upgrades all over the place in here. Another card that I just couldn't fit because of the cost in here, but maybe it comes down in the future, is the Queen, as we mentioned, the 5-drop.
Mhm.
That can shift for 2.
Yeah.
So I had, because the Queen also has that Queen tag, I originally had her in here instead of Tiana, and I had the 5-drop in here. I get a set of Maximus here, the other bodyguard that helps with some of your lower attack units, can help trade in here too. So I had the Queen in here instead of Maximus, and the other Queen instead of Tiana, and some different units here as well that still fit within the tribal tags and whatnot. But this deck
And
is upgradable, it's moldable, and I think it's a really
yeah.
great start for anybody wanting to play Stitch Rockstar.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? So like the Stitch is the expensive part, right? You got 3 of them in there, but they're a great investment, very
Mhm.
safe investment at this point in the game. Stitch is going to be a strong card for all sorts of aggro and mid-range decks, and so you can't really like go wrong picking up this card used to be worth like $15 a pop, right? Now it's down to below 5 and probably will keep going down once Inklands comes out. So
Absolutely.
it's it's really not a bad card to pick up. I mean, you compare it to like other cards that are out there that are costing 30-40 bucks. Like this is totally, I mean, you think about it, $5 is a pack of cards, and you probably would be stoked if a pack of cards had nothing and a Stitch in it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
If you opened it up and it
So
was
not
just a Stitch.
but if you were worried about the Stitch, you're like, I really want to get as lean as possible as budget, you could just trade in the Queens for the Stitches,
Yeah,
just 1-to-1.
absolutely.
Now
Yeah.
obviously you'll have less draw, but you'll have a good alternative instead, that fits with the theme of Royals. So
Yeah, you
yeah.
could probably take a couple of your 2-drops and make them something in the 3 to 4 range to make it a little bit more mid range centric if you get rid of the Stitches, because you don't have to be so heavy at the 1 and 2 slot. But yeah, you can,
Yeah.
depending on what your kind of, I'll say, bank breaker unit is that you've got in your deck, whether it's your Stitch or if it's the Queens or something else like that, you can
Mhm.
make this deck whatever you want to.
Yeah. Really good deck list, Gibby.
Thank
Love
you.
this. If I was a new player, we've previewed 7 lists now between the 2 videos. This is one of the 2 decks that I would be most interested in. This one and then the Emerald Amethyst list, I think, are 2 rock solid lists that you just can't go wrong with. I think the other 2 we looked at are definitely on the brand of the Pabbie's Treats and Yeets. If we can go back to that real fast and take a look.
Absolutely.
I think this is probably the most creative. You're going to be the most unique person. You walk in and they'll be like, what are you playing? And you'll get to win or lose. You'll be able to feel like, hey, I brought something, that people haven't seen and that people aren't messing with. And people have stopped experimenting with this. And you can be the one to bring this in as a new player and really feel like you're doing something cool. I think as far as the Dwarfs go, this is basically uh use the budget, the discount bin as much as humanly possible, because literally you could take the Snow Whites out and this deck is like $13. This is
Yeah,
the
for
most
sure.
garbage bin dumpster diving deck you could possibly get. But if you really want to toe that line between what is budget and what is not budget, man, the Backstage pass list just feels like a great option for you to start if you want to start strong in the game.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today while we go through these 3 decks. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Like I said, we'll be linking any of these 3 decks, linking all 3 of the codes below the video. If you're not already a part of the community, come join us over on our Discord at Camp Legend. We would love to see you. We've got Lorcana conversations there, along with all of our other videos that we are doing for Starter Set. So Starter Set being we go through a different digital card game every single month. And we are currently reviewing Warp Forge, the Warhammer 40,000 for 40K online digital card game. We'll be doing that through the month of January, and then we'll be switching into a new game in February, and we'll be doing that every single month. So other content as well on our YouTube. Come check us out on YouTube if this isn't where you're watching the video, and we'll see you guys next time.